Hey guys, welcome to another Kane Audio vlog. It's Friday, so it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment below this video with any question you want and I'll read it out next Friday and answer it. So today, for example, I'm reading out last week's questions. Very, very simple. If you like the idea and you want to get involved, hit like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Before I start last week's questions, house admin. Some of you will have noticed Mau5trap posted an image last night, or yesterday if you're in America. Keep your eyes peeled on that. Other than that, as usual, a fair bit has happened this week, and something I'm really pleased with and proud of, but I can't say anything about it, which is annoying for you, because I hate it when people are all mystic about stuff like that. So yeah, there we go, let's get on with it. I can't think of anything else house admin wise. No, I think that's it. So let's get on with it. Starting at the top with Sunset86. Hey Dom, thanks for another great AMA. Road, high five. Quick question. Where did you get your desk from? I need a decent sized desk for a small room. Yours looks ideal. Thanks and have a great weekend. Thank you. This one is actually a cheap IKEA job. I can't remember the price. I think it was like 15, maybe £20. There is also, I don't know if I kept it when I moved. I think I did. But anyway, there's also, you can get to add on to this, there's like a corner piece. So you could have two and then a corner to sort of fill the corner of a room. It's like one of those modular ones, and I think you choose different legs and stuff. But yeah, it was cheap. However, in my proper studio, you'll have noticed, or you probably wouldn't have noticed because it was the same color, it was still white, but that was a much bigger, wider, deeper, heavier desk, and I think that was IKEA again, and I think it was an architect's desk or something, because you could angle it if you needed. I never did, but I don't know any music producer that wouldn't want a flat desk, to be honest. But yeah, so I would highly recommend those if you're on a tight budget. You know, this one, for example, when I moved into this house, I literally had a few of these spare, actually stored away in the last studio, in the back room. And so yeah, when I moved in here, I just thought, oh sod it, it's a small room, it's only, well, supposedly temporary. So yeah, so I just chucked this table in. However, once I've built the garden studio, I am looking at a desk, which a friend of mine, James Funtcase, he recommended that. I'm trying to think of the name. Glorious Workstation, I think, and that was about £300. In the last studio I did look at desks far too often. When I first built that studio, I was thinking about getting a custom desk, and then I was thinking maybe I'd build one myself, and then that never happened because I'm too lazy. But every time I saw a desk that I liked, I mean, they were, you know, $2,000, $3,000. They were stupid money, which is probably fine if you're putting $500,000 worth of equipment in. Then you can justify a couple of grand on a desk. But that's not me. I think even if I had that sort of money, I don't think I could justify thousands of pounds on a desk, because they weren't special. I don't know what they were, I don't know how they were justifying those prices, but yeah, but I have seen, like I say, that one, I think it's called Glorious Workstation, and that's like £300 or something like that. which is pretty much a bargain in the world of studio desks. So there we go, there's a lot of talk about desks. Nathan Zaskarinskis, Road Dom, high five. I have a few questions for you again, if you don't mind. I don't. I consider my sound design to be quite good, especially after getting addicted to Eurocrack. Anyhow, what would you suggest to get better at sound design? Would it just be a case of messing around with stuff until stuff sounds like what I want? Well, kind of, yeah. That's a really tricky one to answer, because this is going to sound a bit odd, but I've never really thought about how to learn something like sound design, because I don't know if it's just something that came naturally to me, or it was something that I learned without trying to learn. So I don't know how you start with that, and I guess it depends on what kind of sound design you wanted to achieve. Is it, you know, are you looking at, you want to design leads and basses and things like that, you know, using things like Eurorack, or is it something like you want to develop more effects and sweeps and things like that, or is it that you want to do Foley sound effects for movies or something like that? So I guess that, you know, sound design is a pretty broad spectrum, of which I've done most, and I don't know how I learnt to do them. Yeah, it's kind of tricky. I mean, I think most of it probably comes down to experimentation and just playing with sounds and, you know, seeing what they do. Yeah, because I'm always fascinated by sound design in films. So for example, if you watch a nature documentary, 99.9% of those sounds are faked sounds, because you can't mic up a lion in the African plains. You know, that's not what is going to happen. You know, what you're hearing in a nature documentary is not what you're seeing. In fact, a friend of mine, Tazos, runs a company called SoundSnap. If you ever want Foley sound design type stuff for movies, then SoundSnap is a great place to get those sorts of sounds, because you'll have random things like anything from laser effects to gunshots to car doors closing, you know, just random sounds. He gave a talk on TED, I think it was TEDx or something, but yeah, I recommend to anyone who likes these videos, go watch the TED talk from Tazos Fransalis on sound design for film. He gives, in his opening talk, he shows you some clips of rain falling down with sound and says one of them is not real, and asks you to try and think in your head which one is not the real one. And yeah, there are some fascinating results in that. I'm not going to ruin it for anyone because it is well worth watching, so go watch that. Yeah, other than that, I think it's just experimentation. So for example, did I have it when I was doing these videos? Did I ever show it publicly? I don't think I did, but I did have a Kima Pakarana, which was one of the devices used for the voice of Wall-E. They use it in Star Wars sound design, and it's kind of like, I think we were talking about Pure Data and Max MSP and stuff last week. It's kind of that object orientated thing, but more for sound design. And so you can build reverb units or crossfaders, but the crossfaders run in real-time Fourier transforms, for example. So you could, for example, get the sound of a woman singing and a cat meowing, and you can fade between the two, and it will do a Fourier transform crossfade. So it it quite literally, it blends from a woman singing into a cat meowing and back again, or you know, there's all sorts of crazy manipulations you can do with stuff like that. And I guess my best advice for sound design is to understand the concepts of how certain sounds are achieved. You know, I remember when I was a teenager and I heard what was for me the first sort of reverse chord swell, and I remember thinking, wow, what is that sound in the rave culture? Now I know that you're essentially pressing a chord on a synth, recording it with a bunch of reverb and bouncing that down to audio, flipping it around, reversing it, and that's your chord swell, and it sounds beautiful. So yeah, so I guess it's about understanding the concepts of how certain sounds are made, I suppose. Secondly, does copyright expire? I've been listening to a drum step artist, Figure, and he seems to use a lot of samples from old horror films, so I'm assuming it does, but I'm unsure. Yes, so movie audio copyright is different to music audio copyright in terms of expiration and things, but also I think the UK or Europe and the USA are also different in terms of expiration dates. And to my understanding, you also get options of renewals, so you still need to be careful. I think the old rule was something like when a movie is 30 or 50 years old, then you can take samples from that, the copyright drops out. And so it used to be, I think, any pre-1923 movie, if I remember rightly, you could pretty much sample anything you wanted and that would be fine. So there are a lot of films like the Abominable Snowman or whatever that you could take from. However, I think now it's an automatic 75 years and then an option for renewal or something like that. So I don't want to say too much either way, just in case I'm wrong, but I think it's got a bit more complicated now, because depending on when the movie was made, it now can re-trigger. So there's no guarantee. It used to be pretty much, oh, anything before this date and you were fine. But I don't think that's the case now. So I would imagine that's probably the case. Is Figure the name of the artist, I'm assuming? I would imagine he or she is probably doing old horror films for that reason, because they're probably in public domain. However, public domain is the keyword you guys want if you want to search stuff. Then there are public domain records, and you can find public domain movies and public domain music and whatever. The same goes for music. I think it's like either 50 or 100 years after the artist dies, I think the copyright gets released to the public, which is why you'll find, you know, a lot of people will release a complextro version of a Mozart song or something like that, because it's copyright free basically, and it means they don't have to think about writing music. Lastly, what are your thoughts on field recording? I mean, like, recording sounds to manipulate them into samples for production. I think it's awesome. I think it's a cool thing, but I'm unsure if it would be worth the hassle. So if you want to get into sound design, then that's a great way of learning how to manipulate one sound into another, and where the boundaries are and where you can take it. So for example, you know, if you want to do, it's probably a crap idea because it's just off the top of my head, but if you wanted to do the roar of a dinosaur, you know, you could probably layer up. For example, if you were to record your stomach rumbling, would be one layer, and then I would suggest looking at some upper frequency layers to put on top. Maybe something like dragging your nail across something metal or a knife or something like that. Dragging a knife across metal, not your nail across a knife, because that would be stupid. So something along those lines, I guess. And then if you were to manipulate them right with just a touch of the right effects, and again looking at things like fast Fourier transforms and manipulations along those lines, then you can really start getting creative. So in terms of field recording and bringing it into dance music, maybe not so useful. Certainly not for your key instruments. So I you know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to go and record a lion roaring in the wild, or a wind in the trees, and then convert it into a kick drum or a lead synth or bass line, clearly. But if you wanted some properly unique effects like the sweeps and you know, different effects that we put in our tracks, then I would say that's one of the best ways to go. But first and foremost, you've got to enjoy it, because a lot of it takes a lot of time. You know, you need a decent recorder. I would probably recommend the Zoom H4 and upwards. You know, and they're not particularly cheap, but you need a good field recorder to be able to get good field recordings. Otherwise you're just going to get a lot of hiss in the background and whatever. And I guess it just takes a lot of practice, really. But you know, if you're able to, I don't know, let's say you're near a fast main road in the middle of the night, so you can capture the sound of just one car going past, and say that car is a V8, V10, V12 engine, so it's a real screamer, you know, and you catch the Doppler effect of it going past you on a dual microphone. You know, there's probably all sorts you could do with something like that, or even, like I said, wind in the trees or something, if you wanted to drench that into reverb and maybe, you know, high pass filter, sweep it, and you could do all sorts of stuff with that. Sounds pretty cool, actually. Hopefully they're easy to answer. Yeah. Sereno Black, kudos for another great video. Road, high five. Any plans to release a sub 37 bank? There are not enough on the market. I haven't looked for them, to be honest, so I didn't know there aren't enough on the market. In fact, where do you go? Where is the market for sub 37 banks? Whenever I've done Moog banks, I've obviously given them to Moog, and they've put them out as factory presets, or I think maybe they're available separately on the website. I don't even know. So I haven't really got plans to do it, but I've got to be honest, I have been asked that a lot of times about the sub 37, so maybe that's something I should look into. Yeah, okay, I'll look into that. Zombo, Mr. Bill did a video on Mau5trap breaking down one of his tracks. Are you going to do something similar? I did with Structures. Anyone who is a member of sonicacademy.com will remember I did breakdown of the Structures track for Sonic Academy, and I also did a remix competition where the winner of that competition got their remix released on the next We Are Friends compilation, and I touched on that, saying Mau5trap released an image yesterday, so go check it out. I've got another track coming out fairly soon, and then I'm looking to push my EP, so I'm hoping I'll probably do something. I don't know if I'll do it with Sonic Academy again. I probably will, to be honest, because I like their format and I like the guys there, and I'm a big supporter of the Sonic Academy community, so I kind of feel like that's where it should be. Maybe I'll do two, because I kind of feel like that's almost unfair, because obviously people pay for Sonic Academy and whatever, and so it's yeah, maybe if I'm doing an EP, maybe I'll do two breakdown series. Maybe one I'll do publicly for this channel, and I'll give that to Mau5trap to share out as well, and then another one for Sonic Academy. Yeah, I think that answers that. Kev OK, cheers Dom. Website project sounds interesting. Looking forward to the announcement. Yep, we're still making progress on that. We've had a few small hitches this week on that, but nothing major, so I'm still kind of hoping that we should be ready to alpha test, and I mean alpha test. It's going to be pretty crap at the beginning, so don't get your hopes up. But we should hopefully be ready to alpha test this side of Christmas, which means we'll probably do it in the new year, because it's pointless opening up an alpha test before Christmas. I'm definitely interested in being involved in the alpha test, unless it requires the surgical installation of a microchip or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't involve that. It's literally a website. You can upload your track, and it processes your track and spits it back out at you, and hopefully a better version. But we'll see. Who knows? Could be far worse. It's all very experimental at the moment. Sample Robot also sounds very useful. Definitely going to check that out. Some of my mates will probably be interested in it too. Yes. So I mentioned Sample Robot. If you're watching this video for the first time and you didn't watch last week's, Sample Robot is a great app for sampling hardware or software, but aimed at hardware, to then convert it into a digital bank of sounds, so you can take that anywhere with you if you have a load of hardware. Going a little further down the audio geekery rabbit hole, have you also played with C-Sound? No, but I'm aware of it. I've just never played with it. I've dipped my toes, but not really got to grips with C-Sound, or indeed Pure Data, Max or others. Realistically, is it worth taking the plunge for sound design or composition purposes? Again, I guess it depends on what your end goal is. The thing is what I've said about Eurorack stuff as well, you know, or any modular synths. If you're a music producer and you want to produce, say, commercially accessible tracks, you know, then going down the route of things like Max MSP and C-Sound and Pure Data and those sorts of things, are they going to help you? Maybe. Are they going to hinder you? Very probably. Even if they help, they'll probably still hinder, because they're a pain in the arse to work with. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it's a lot of head work, when you could have probably just as easily got yourself a copy of Serum or Anna 2 or you know, any popular synth and just dialed it in from there. So realistically, is it worth taking the plunge for sound design or composition purposes? It really depends on what you enjoy. You know, I've always sort of said that you know, if you enjoy that geeky side of stuff and you enjoy making new sounds and you don't mind spending 10 hours trying to get something to make a sound, and you've got the time and you do it, you know, you find it relaxing, then that's great. If, however, you've got a deadline to do a remix and it's in a week's time, and that label you're doing a remix for just wants it to be a cool but somewhat generic track, then you don't want to go down the routes of anything original in terms of sound design. So you know, I guess it's about weighing up the pros and cons for yourself. But if you wanted to go into the world of sound design as a career option in one way or another, then it's certainly worth dabbling with them, you know, on and off for a few months and get your head around the basics of how they function, what they're capable of. And also these things have a lot, you know, they've got a pretty big community. Max MSP in particular, when I used to play with these things, Max MSP had a huge community, and people would share their stuff, and also people, you know, you could post your patch onto a forum as a text file, I think, if I remember rightly, and you could post it into the forum going, guys, why doesn't this make a sound? Can someone help? And usually there's someone there helpful enough to be able to give it a tweak and send it back to you and help you out. So because of that, you know, there's a lot of open source stuff, there's a lot of freeware stuff, there's a huge sort of community driven thing behind it, which is invaluable really. So if that's your cup of tea, then go for it. I'm not really planning to create any synths or effects plugins anytime soon. Would my time be better spent learning Bitwig and Mixbus inside out first to achieve the result of actually getting some music done? Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was just saying, is that if your end goal is to just get music done, then don't bother with things like Max MSP, because they're going to slow you down. But if your end goal is to create something truly unique and only, you know, specific to you and your thing, then it's certainly worth going down that road. If you're going to look at making plugins or VSTs, which I'm kind of playing with the ideas of at the moment, then even then I wouldn't say Max MSP or C Sound or Pure Data is the way to go. I would say C++ is probably the way to go, and that's a whole different world. Thanks as always, Road. High five. Andrew Hollis, hi, Road. In fact, before I start, yeah, I'm coming up to 26 minutes, so I'm going to reset the camera as usual, because my camera won't hit half an hour. See you in a sec. Okay, Andrew Hollis, hi, Road, high five. How do you organise your samples? Do you just use the Bitwig file browser to search sounds, or do you use one of the many sample management tools out there, such as LoopCloud or Synonym? Friend of mine, Jim, is behind LoopCloud, and I'm a big fan of it, but I don't use it because I'm just a stickler for my own ways, because I've always used the Ableton or Bitwig browser. I've never really, I just naturally go to that. I just gravitate towards it. I think if I was to start producing today, I'd probably get more familiar with something like LoopCloud, because it is a great system, and I do highly recommend it to anyone who isn't OCD like me. Then go for something like LoopCloud. Synonym, I don't know, never heard of it, so couldn't vouch for it. But yeah, I just use the Bitwig browser. I tend to have my loops, packs and sample banks in some sort of structure, almost by genre, but not quite. But because I've been doing it all for so long, I just know where they all are, and I know where to find them. So yeah, I'm just a stickler for that. Or do you apply your own file structure, like a folder for kicks and subfolders for types of kicks? No, I just go with whatever the folder structure is that the loops pack came with, and I just go with that. To be honest, I don't use that many. You know, I'll probably use a loop in every track that I do, maybe a couple of samples, but I tend to know roughly where the ones I want are, so I don't know, I don't tend to do much exploration really, so I don't really need a good file structure. So yeah, there we go. Outsider, hi Dom, Road, high five. Glad to see some people seem to be up for this idea of a sample stem based competition. Even more happy to see it's all for fun and community. Take away a good bit of info as usual, so thanks as always. You're welcome. I don't have any huge questions in mind, so I guess I'll ask if you have used Softtube's saturation knob, and if so, what do you think of it? I have a long time ago when they first released it, and I can't remember what I thought of it, but in general, saturation can be a very good thing when it's used properly. You've just got to be subtle with it. I always find if you're using saturation or drive on something like a bass line, or especially if you're using it on a drum bus, dial it up until you can hear it's made a difference, and then dial it a little bit back, because you really don't want to overdo that unless subjectively you're going for oversaturated sounds. Yeah, it's just one of those things you've got to be a bit careful with, I suppose. Because just lately I am loving that plugin. Great freebie for anyone who hasn't tried it. Right, I'm thinking of a different one then, because the one I tried was not free. So this must be a new one. In which case, I love it already because it's free. So everyone go look for that. Have a great weekend. You too. Nightquaker, thank you very much for the response, Dom. Pure data is still free, cool, and there are even variations of it like the extended per data, so it's now even better than you remember. Yeah, well, I would imagine a lot of people, because it was, probably still is, open source, so I would imagine there's probably quite a few forks of that these days. Yeah, maybe I'll look into pure data again, because I kind of miss that whole element of sound design. I've not done it for a long time. So yeah, cheers. L7, hey Dom, no question, just wanted to say I've had an issue with clipping and I could never figure it out. Your explanation of sample rate and how it can cause clipping helped me solve said issue. Thanks, dude. You're welcome. Yeah, that was, I think, intersample clipping. If I remember right, if I'm thinking of the right thing, it was intersample clipping, and it was, the way to fix that is using a true peak limiter, and I highly recommend New Gen Audio ISL2 for that, because it's awesome, especially for the fact that you can hit, there's a difference button and it'll play you only the bits that are being clipped or capped or limited by the limiter, so you can really sort of hear what you're losing on a track. So if you smash it to shit and then hit the difference button, you're going to hear most of your track, or at least most of the transients. So I find when I'm doing that sort of final master, I'll load up ISL2 and I will maybe get a 1 dB gain reduction, just minute gain reduction, and then listen to that diff button, and you're hearing usually the very peak transient of maybe a hi-hat or a clap or something like that, where the clap hits at the same time as a kick. So yeah, you can hear what you're losing basically, which is a great thing to hear. BWO official, Road, high five. Rod Marconi, Road, high five. St. Nicholas, early AMA today. It was, I don't know what time it is now, might get another one today. And that, my friends, is it for this week. If you've made it this far, we're probably well over half an hour now, so well done to you. You deserve a medal. And to prove you made it this far into the video, I am going to say comment the word robot, because I'm looking at one on a shelf up there. I'll see you next week. Cheers.